That laser focus, that never for a second you forget that I'm going for that bread. I do understand that life will knock me around. The path to success is not this, it's this. I just don't forget where I'm going. And then you put all these things on the board. When you achieve one of those things, like I have, then it's like, wow, that was against all odds. For me to achieve what I achieved is exactly the same that life existing in this universe. It's almost not possible, right? I did it. Then there's a check mark. Okay, that was cool. How about this? How about that? And the more of these you do, then what happens, you basically train your mind that the impossible is achievable. And that has a profound spiritual effect.
I'm here with a good friend of mine, Zoltan Bathory. And in many circles, you don't need no introductions, but we'll do a short one. You are, I guess, at the moment, the thing you're the most known for is that you are the founder and also play in the #1 streaming band in the world right now, which is the Five Finger Death Punch. You're an incredible guitarist, musician, but you're also an architect. You have you hold black belts both in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu and in Judo. And you also you took some championships, right?
Yeah, I got some medals.
Yeah, so
I
got
got some
medals.
hardware here and there.
Incredibly, you also got into architecture. You got so in business. Really, I always describe you as the perfect pattern recognizer. Your pattern recognition is just off the charts. You understand what works, and you know how to actualize these patterns versus just understand them. And I'm deeply privileged to know you and to call you a friend. And the context for this particular conversation is, I'll just set it up, is that you have been also part of more, again, I guess you can say, you know, not really underground, but there are certain elements of the human psyche that you've been exploring throughout your life that you weren't really vocal about or talking about in the public because you didn't feel like it actually serves a real purpose, and you're not in the habit of just, running your mouth when it's irrelevant. But you and I had incredible and wonderful long conversations about spirituality, about psychedelics, about these spaces. And now, because of what you're seeing in the world and a little bit of what you're seeing that happens with my project with the laser, you said, well, maybe I can say a few words about that, and I immediately jumped on the opportunity, and I'm very glad that you decided to do so. And this kind of sets up the stage for this conversation. People may be eavesdropping kind of like into the middle of the conversation here. So yeah, that's the context in which we have. So first of all, thank you so much for doing this, brother. I love you, and thank you so much for doing this. If you would have to walk someone, let's say, somebody for some reason drops someone on you and like, hey, we got to walk this person through A to Z. We got to start them with something light. What would be the first thing that you would do to have a conversation with someone who had zero experience with spirituality, with psychedelics? What would be the first thread you would pull?
Obviously, it's people who have no experience, right? We would have to separate the people who have a spiritual understanding, that they are spiritually aware. So there is a basis we can talk about something. They already have an awareness, they already believe in certain things, understand synchronicities, and understand that there are coincidences that are just too strange to be completely coincidences, right? So depending on the person, obviously, like, am I talking to somebody who's completely shut out of this, or I'm talking to somebody who's already a believer in some way, right? I would start with probably examples. I would start with examples of myself, what happened to me, so I can talk from a very specific perspective to bring somebody into, at least to the curiosity.
Or to see also where they stand, like what connects. Like
Correct. It's like, first, I would probably start with, like I had near-death experiences, 2 of them. That was near-death experience. When we use this word, actually, it's an interesting word, because nothing really dies. So what is near death? So what is it? Near transition, near to the point where I almost left this body for good experience, whatever we want to phrase this, right? So I had 2 of those, heavy duty actually, and I would recount those experiences. And I would probably start there, like, hey, this happened to me, and it's not something that I can discount. It happened. It was a very physical, very real thing that happened to me, and there's no imagination. There's no fluff. Nothing I would put in there that I can't almost mechanically explain. Like, this happened to me, and I would start there. So I would start with people understanding that the layers of our bodies and our minds, like I have a body.
That's a high bar to start with from.
I mean, because everybody has one. So I would probably
Do you
start
think
with
so?
like,
you think that everybody? Oh, you mean everybody
body.
has a layer of understanding?
Like I would start with like, okay, you don't have a brain.
I don't have a.
You don't have a brain. Your brain has a body.
What are you saying, bro?
So I would probably start there. Like I would start with the abstract. Like, okay, you all say like, my mind, my brain, my this and that, right? That's your perception. And literally it's not that way. It's like, no, your brain has a body.
Right.
So let's flip the perception to, I have a mind that lives in the brain, and this brain has a body, an exoskeleton. So the mind will use the software that's in the brain, and the software basically is how to move my fingers, how to operate this exoskeleton. So I would say like the brain is basically the physical interface between the body and the mind. The mind decides like, okay, I am going to stand up now. Then we're going to use the software that's in the brain that will tell the body how to do that, how to execute the wishes of the mind. So I would probably start there.
Do you think the body has intelligence of its own without the mind? Like it can't operate without the brain, of course, but are there intuitions that literally exist in the body that are not necessarily translatable to anything that is happening in the brain? That's a real open question I'm asking.
Right.
Because some people in spiritual communities would say, no, the heart has a mind of its own. It knows things. Where do you follow that?
I would say that the body, memories and certain things you store in the body. So this entire body would be a storage place. And I would say that, okay, well, you don't store everything in your mind. Memories and all the things that you store is not necessarily stored in the mind. It's basically the way we even remember things, the electrochemical process. It's a lot of people think almost like as it's a videotape you can play back. That's not what happens. Your body has to reassemble the chemical state it was to recreate the memory.
It's like an index.
That's why, yes.
Yeah, and it has something to do with emotion for sure. Like you remember through feeling more than anything, I feel.
Correct. So all those things have to be brought back. This is why trauma is a trauma. You have to relive the trauma when you remember something horrible, because the chemical composition of that happenstance, right? And the emotional connection to that all comes back in the same time. Yeah. And then treating trauma would be basically bring up the memory, let's talk about it, and let's see if you can restore it in a different way. That's what happens. Well, so I look at the body that there's a very complex, it's an exoskeleton to manifest. So my mind has an idea, and there are layers above the mind, but let's start at the mind. The mind has an idea, and it will use the software that's stored in the physical brain to get this body to execute certain things. And in this three-dimensional world that we perceive, my mind could not do whatever it wants to do without the interface and without the body. So if I wanted to write a song, if I wanted to sculpt, then I need this physical body to create the sculpture. And everything that we kind of look around here was an idea first. It was in the mind, and through the process of the mind, the imagination, the creativity was channeled through the interface, and the interface basically controlled the body, like, okay, let's build this couch. Let's do this. Everything around us that's here is, again, was an idea and happened that way. So in some way, it's almost like we are playing Universal Sim City. We are creating things like, how about this idea? And then now it exists. And now we're going to make it. So this world that we're seeing, it's almost like a giant storage space of ideas that being manifested. Now, within this process, the body is a way more, this is a giant chemical factory. It's an electromagnetic power generator. It's an extremely complex system, and so I wouldn't say that it's just a body and it's just muscles and it's a mechanical.
Yeah, it's not just mechanical. There's an essence there.
Right.
One of the main reasons that you thought that you might be ready to talk about some of this stuff is because you believe there's a value there that is very important for humanity. Aside from the fact that, from the very practical, pragmatic thing, which, and we can talk about it, but obviously your success in life, according to your experience, has a lot to do with your connections with the higher realms. Like your understanding that things are not just manifesting in terms of what you do in this world, it's also the state you occupy while you're trying to do these things, or the ideas that you receive, what level of emergence they come from. That's the potential that they have to actually manifest in the world, and to what degree. And so that's kind of like on the practical side. Right. But aside from that, why do you feel that understanding these deeper components of ourselves as humans, our spiritual dimension, that psychedelics open the window to, why are those so crucial to this transitional stage of the human evolution, you feel?
I do believe that we are at a cusp of a new awakening. Like I joke about it, that this is the end of childhood for humanity. I think it started, there was one in the 60s, obviously. And
it tried to happen.
It was kind of there, almost there. But if you really look at that, since actually, let's talk about this, right? A lot of people who were part of that spiritual revolution in the 60s, right? Those are the very people who lived that are today's ultra successful entrepreneurs.
All of them?
Not all of them,
yeah.
A lot of them. So if you go and start to talk to heavy hitting CEOs, like a generation or two before us, right? They have lived that spiritual experience in the 60s. They were part of that. So those guys are now in their 60s, 70s and ultra successful. I have read not memoirs, but when you're reading about people, and here and there they kind of sprinkle that in there, that they
the Steve Jobs of the world.
That's kind of what I'm talking
right,
about.
Right. So let me just nail it.
Is it actually interesting that, because you said this, like what we were talking about in the beginning, if you look at those people who are ultra successful and were part of that spiritual awakening in the 60s, and they don't really talk about it. It's really rare that you kind of picking up, like you knew about Steve Jobs, but he's not the only one. There are a lot of these guys. And they don't really talk about it. And I had the same issue, kind of like, I'm part of that sort of spiritual awakening revolution and dove into psychedelics in 95. And I never really talked about this. Before this, I never openly actually talked about this, like how deep I went into this and how deep I'm involved in this.
Yeah, you're probably one of the only other people that I met that went as deep as I did,
right.
And maybe sometimes even deeper.
Right, because I feel like the world is not ready. That's what I mean, end of childhood. This is why we talk about this now, because things are changing. 10 years ago, if I was talking about, 5-MeO, DMT, or just DMT, NN-DMT, people would be looking like, it's not even in English. And now that giant podcasters like Joe Rogan and a lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of scientists are getting involved, and highly reputable people stepping out to the light and have a knowledge of or experienced this, right?
So it's the understanding that these
changing.
Spaces bring, basically the more expensive nature of reality itself that seems to be required to be aware of and to embody, to transition to whatever this next step of evolution is. That's what I'm hearing you saying.
Yes, I feel like that spiritual evolution is going to continue what started in the 60s.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like we weren't ready.
Right.
Because the counterpoint to this whole thing is that
Yeah.
babies definitely walked into traffic a lot.
Right.
So that was the bad side of it, right? So I think like humanity was not mature enough. And now we may be hopefully mature to some degree enough. If I hear your point correctly, you're saying that these things always hold also the potential for the dangerous side. But the ones that did learn how to utilize these tools became
Right.
successful on a level that the ones that
Correct.
didn't necessarily have the easiest time to do.
Yes, I feel like the ones who understood the patterns, because there are patterns, there are synchronicities. And, generally a lot of people notice it's like, wow, interesting, that always happens to me. Interesting, this coincidence happened. But those who kind of dove into this world back then, I think they didn't talk about it, but I think it was a massive part of their success. That's kind of what I'm saying. That I believe that just like it was mine, I never really talked about this, right? And this is definitely the foundation. The way I operate on this planet, the way I operate in this simulation or this three-dimensional existence is heavy duty. In fact, based completely. I don't even say heavy duty. It's almost like I don't even do anything that's not based on this system, this belief system, this idea of actually what's happening.
How does that express itself in practicality? Let's say you come to a business deal with somebody, you look at them, you look at the details of the deal looks really, really good on the surface, let's say, but there's something in there about the way they speak, about the way they operate, where their focus goes. Can that break a business deal for you?
Yes, definitely.
Interesting.
Definitely. There is, it's a giant subject and it has so many layers.
But it definitely plays a big component for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
There are things that give you a practical example how power moves. So I'm using spiritual principles to build an empire, let's say. This empire requires that nobody fights a war alone. I need to build an army. I need to build my environment, my infrastructure. And then by me building this Tower of Babel, this infrastructure to get to a point where I'm trying to get, obviously there are going to be partners, the first lieutenants, the sergeants, they're going to be this infrastructure. And as this structure elevates, it's going to bring up, the seas raising, lifting all the boats. And sometimes it happens when I notice like, okay, by me gaining power, let's just call it power, social, economic, whatever, power. By me gaining power, also these other people gaining power around me, my partners, right? Even employees, everybody's raising with this structure. And if I notice that somebody's usage of power is not, what would be the word? It's not aligned. When you're not using power the right way, when there is something, I don't want to use the word evil about it, but there are
selfish.
It's dissonant. I think that would be the word, dissonant. That the way somebody goes about it, that's a deal breaker to me. And then I have a conflict that if I'm elevating the structure, it's elevating your power and you're going to misuse that power, and I can see that. I will have to sever that connection. Sometimes I will abandon the entire project if I can sever the connection. Let's say, practical example, let's say I have 2, 3, 4, 5 partners in another adventure. And we're building something and I notice like 1 or 2 people in this structure are misusing power. And we could argue who are you to judge? But that's why we're talking about.
Yeah, but that's your organization.
Yes, and not just that. It's like I build this and I'm working with the spiritual principles. I have to be true to my beliefs. That's the only thing I can be true to. Right? So my perception, my beliefs is my kingdom, right? I can't live my life with somebody else's perception. This is the only one I know. And as far as I'm concerned, maybe this is the only perception that exists actually, right? So I have to play by these rules. So if I notice that you're going to misuse that power and then it gets unacceptable to me, I will abandon the entire project. If I can't get disconnected or can get rid of that person, then I will abandon the whole project because I can't be part of this structure that is doing something that's against the rules, if I can say rules.
Well,
Like it's dissonant.
the way I define evil is always the more only inwards looking it is, but not inwards looking in an introspective way, but just a gain thing. So the more you only care about yourself and your own gain, and you always put that above everything else in the organization, society, greater good of all, to the degree that you're doing that is exactly the degree to which you're evil.
Right.
The more you try and incorporate more elements that take into account others' well-being, the less evil you are, because you're trying to aim the whole system towards a particular thing that encompasses more and more beings. Basically,
right. I want to put a tagline to that word evil, because we are walking on a territory where words are just references. We're trying to use references that are not actually accurate, but we don't have better words. But a tagline I want to put that to that evil, that I can take the perception that everything is just is.
yeah.
So is there truly evil? We could question mark that.
Yeah,
right?
well, not even in the human perception, even in this, like I guess the dark element. So
Right.
like you're more of the dark element, and it's not bad in its nature the way we think of it. You need these short circuits to complete a task. So you can't build a structure if you just aim towards forever. You
Right.
have to, the buck has to stop somewhere for you to create
Right.
a structure, either a company or a building or whatever it is. So it's the perfect combination between the open-ended white or the yin, right, and the closed-ended thing, which is trying to close a cycle on something.
Right.
The perfect combination of these arcs is what creates healthy structures.
Correct.
Yeah.
But more so, I'm talking about that we could ask, okay, who are you to judge that, right?
Well, I think
who am I to judge that? Who am
Yeah.
I to be the judge of what's this, what's that, what's evil, what's not evil? So that's why I kind of wanted to put the tagline to the word evil.
I would say what works. I would say it's like a tightrope. So like towards certain aims, certain mixture of the yin and the yang would work, and for other structures, a different mixture of the yin and the yang would work. That's how I view it. It's not necessarily that it's like evil in the sense of like it's unfavorable. It's not
Right.
what I mean, because you do need some of these elements to complete certain things. But again, it's like if something is too structured, it's too rigid. It's not gonna survive. If it's too open-ended, nothing happens. Nothing's gonna happen.
It's
So,
interesting because our personalities, you're very mechanical. You looked at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
mechanical part. I'm looking at the organic part of this.
Right.
So you're right on the mechanical part. Now I'm gonna add the organic part.
Sure.
The organic part of this. So this is not about the structure and the efficiency of the structure. And that's why what you're saying is not really questionable, because there is an answer. Is it or is it not efficient, right?
Yeah.
Is it better or is it not better? There's an actual answer. In a second you come to the organic, the answers start to get blurred, because is it evil, is it not? Who am I to decide? Who's the judge of what's good, what's not good from the spiritual perspective, right? And also I can take the overall perception of everything just is. And if everything is in this universe, what we call evil is part of it, therefore it is just is.
So basically you're saying that there's an authenticity to being true to the moment, the way that
Right.
you know it.
Right, so there's a lot to unpack, because we can talk about success and how success follows these patterns. There are spiritual patterns, and there's definitely a roadmap that you can build for yourself, and almost like your synchronicities and all these things start to become pretty frequent, and the things just start to make sense, and then you have these understanding that I can look at something like, okay, we have to go from A to B, right? And then from A to B, what's the most efficient way to go there? And that roadmap kind of pretty clear, actually.
To you.
Yes.
We always have this talk where I
Right.
told
Oh,
you,
yeah.
I don't know if you fully realize that actually knowing what the right thing is,
Right.
or at least the potential right thing, that's actually not that easy to know,
Right.
and you seem to just know that.
I tested it, obviously, in multiple ways. I'm successful in all the ventures. I jumped in, and I used the same sort of navigation.
So there were failures
So
along the way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And more, you imagine something that, okay, I'm going to do that. And the more impossible it looks, the more interesting it is to me. And then you go for it. And then for me, it's a very clear path. Like, okay, I have to do these things. And then comes the spiritual part of the intent and how I use my vision and creative visualization. That, I used to make this example for people, like, okay, I give you a pencil. Can you draw a straight line? Sure. Triangle? Sure. Circle? Almost perfect. Okay. Square? Perfect. All right. Now, the Mona Lisa. And it's like, what? It's like, well, you already draw all the elements that you need to draw. You have clearly full control over that pencil, so what's the problem? The problem is that we don't paint the Mona Lisa. We visualize it and then translate that into the paper. If I compose music, I have to hear the music and then bring it over here. Which is also obvious that the music, the painting, the sculpture is not here. You bring it from somewhere else. The potential of that always existed. And you're just a channel. And you have to have the ability to fetch that and then copy that into existence, into this three-dimensional world. It doesn't happen here, right? So that's kind of how that operates. And the more impossible, and the path that you embark on. Okay, I'm gonna build that, or I'm gonna achieve that, or I'm gonna experience that. So everything we talk about right now is scratching the surface. This is sort of a
beginners.
Well, what hangs into, like, it's almost like if the material world was the planet and the roots are coming. We're hanging into this. We are rooted into this reality, but we are outside of it. A part of us hangs in there. So right now we're talking about this. We're talking about this. Call it this phenomena of a projection. That the jury is still at. Is it my own projection and only and there's nothing else?
The form.
Or is it a shared experience? We can talk about that. There are some.
You're talking about form in general.
I'm talking about the simulation. I'm talking about the simulation, that three-dimensional existence that we talk about. So, because everything I'm talking about right now is of the practicality of how to navigate this. How do I
or also the relevance of the spiritual pursuit for humanity, which to whomever is in it might be obvious, but I'm always asking from the perspective of somebody who's not in it, and then the person is asking, okay, but why should I invest time and why should I pursue this?
But they will be interested in this because the material world looks real to them.
Yeah.
Right. So most people take this on face value and say, okay, this is my life. This is how this is where I have to live. And in this life, I need to be successful. I need to achieve this and that. So if you can say like, hey, there are these spiritual practices. There's this understanding. There's this other world. If you understand, you can use those patterns, that logic, that understanding, that you can channel certain things, and then you can use this in this three-dimensional world, and you can succeed. Then out of suddenly, because they know this, they will be interested in that. Like, okay, where do you get the help from? Where did you get this idea from? How did that happen? And that's kind of, right now we're talking about that.
Yeah.
And every single thing we're talking about is all rooted in that spiritual realm. It's just the manifestation and the utilization of that in this three-dimensional world. Yeah. So when I'm saying that, a couple of components where, okay, the physical existence, I have to train my mind, which somewhat physical, somewhat not. I have to train my mind, I have to train this body, I have to train myself that I'm going to achieve impossible things. And I have an intent, which is the intent I will parallel one more time. I will parallel the intent to what we talked about, the painting of the Mona Lisa. It's very similar to that. If I have an intent, I will have a vision of that, and it never goes away.
See, that part is crazy.
Not for a second. I will never forget. It's like a light that's always there. And
with all the projects you do.
Yes.
From designs to music to architecture, no matter what it is.
There's never a moment when that is not there. Like it's a whiteboard in my mind, and it's always there. So I don't forget ever. what I'm intending to do. Now, life will knock you around. I have to do a bunch of things. You know, you said, okay, I'm going to go to the bakery. I'm going to pick up a piece of bread. And then you get in your car, and then your friend called, hey man, I got a flat tire. Can you come and help me? Oh, okay. You drive over there, and you change a flat tire. Then somebody else goes like, hey, can you help me with that? So all of a sudden, you're zigzagging around town. So the important thing is that you don't forget that I left my house to go get bread. I'm gonna have to get the bread. So yeah, I have to do this, and then I have to do that, and all these things, which everybody does that in life. But if you get comfortable or you forget, then you will stuck in a relationship or a job or somewhere where you shouldn't be. You forgot to get the bread. So that's what I mean by I have this intent. Like I never had a doubt that, okay, I don't like the word rock star, but for the sake of it, let's use that. I was a kid in a communist country, no way out, no passports, no nothing, right? And I was like, I'm going to America and I will be a rock star. Everybody would laugh at me. Right? You can't even leave the country. We don't have passports to leave the country. I never had a doubt. And and I achieved that. But through my entire life, I never had a moment when I doubted that will not happen. Not once.
Do you think
ever.
that you also have the same ability in the spiritual realm? In other words, you never truly forget what your spiritual journey is?
Well, I can say that because I don't think that we are really understanding or completely aware of our spiritual journey, what that is. I can be aware of segments of it, compartmentalize, like I need to do this or that, but as a complete spiritual journey, I don't think we know really where we're going. But on a practical side, what I parallel again from the spiritual realms, the intent, the focus is non-material. It's not something you can measure, so it's not coming from here. That's what I mean. I equate focus and intent that belongs to the other side. Because if it's invisible and unmeasurable. So it's coming from somewhere else. So that's why I say that I have this intent. And again, I don't want to make it a personal thing. I think a lot of successful people have exactly the same thing, maybe a different description, but I think it is the same thing. That laser focus, that never for a second you forget that I'm going for that bread. I do understand that life will knock me around. The path to success is not this, it's this. I just don't forget where I'm going. And then you put all these things on the board. When you achieve one of those things, like I have, then it's like, wow, that was against all odds. For me to achieve what I achieved is exactly the same that life existing in this universe. It's almost not possible, right? I did it. Then there's a check mark. Okay, that was cool. How about this? How about that? And the more of these you do, then what happens, you basically train your mind that the impossible is achievable. And that has a profound spiritual effect. When you stop putting opposing things in your own way. When I think about something, okay, let's do that. As insane it sounds, I will not have that thought that it's impossible. Because it's a practice of like, okay, I threw a rock 100 foot, 100 foot, 100 foot. I pick up one, I don't have a reason to think I can't throw it again that far, right? So it's that self-doubt start disappearing. And life is pretty much like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And you just go for it. You don't have this second thought, oh, it might not happen. No, we're gonna get this, right? And I think when you do that in this world, you're practicing something, you're practicing this manifestation, you're practicing this ability to go for it without a doubt, also has an effect on another side. Like almost like it's connected. So it's a training camp for not just this, but the
Mostly
spiritual
for
part.
that, yeah.
Right? And then all these concepts start emerging. Like I believe that you have to look at your existence and say, okay, is this world happening to me, or am I happening to this world? And it's an interesting thought because you can sit in the fence on this one. It's this or that. And so,
Or you're happening as the world. That's also a possibility.
happening as the world would be accurate, but when willpower and, of course, that would be accurate, but when willpower and building or achieving anything involved, right, then I think then you do have to make this distinction.
Yeah, because what is the
it's-
unitary power? If you just say, I always say, like, if people say we're all one, okay,
Yes.
now what? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
how does that help you to do anything?
Correct.
It's like,
That's literally what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That we could take the almost nihilistic position of, well, we are happening with the world, but then what, right? We are
Yeah.
one with everything.
there's
but
some
then
function
what?
that is called you, that is doing
Right.
a thing.
Right.
You have to take that into account,
Right.
at least
And-
for a period of time.
Correct. And because it's important, even if you don't know why this is important, it's important. Otherwise, it wouldn't be happening,
Mhm.
right? So if I make that line, am I happening to the world, or is the world happening to me? I think this is a very important. Again, we're talking about this side. We're talking about the tonal, not the nakwa. If you're a Castaneda fan, we're talking about this reality, what happens here, and how we can use this pragmatically in this world. If you make this decision, I am happening to this world versus the world is happening to me. A very interesting thing happens to your personality, and I think this is the trait of the winners.
The
Because
what?
a trait of the winners, if making that decision that I am happening to this world. And if I derive it from just simple logic, when I was born into this world, assumably, it's important, assumably it was already here. Because we can have other versions of this conversation.
In real time.
Did this, if I'm in a simulation, the entire history and everything that I perceive might be not even true. It was just downloaded, and you log into Call of Duty. I don't need to know where the buildings came from and why are they there. They're just there, as if
Yeah, you just drop into the environment.
correct. And I could say, like, well, the history of that could be just a program downloaded.
Yeah, it feels
So-
like I frame it a little bit differently. I always say that a big transformation happens when people realize they're a participator, not a spectator.
right. What the question mark beyond that is that I am participating, but the history, that the thing I was born into, was it really here? Or when I came to consciousness, this is
That
the
seems to
day
be
that I
less
started.
relevant to me functionally. I don't know why. It never grabs my interest.
Functionally probably not.
No,
relevant.
like it doesn't do anything to me. Like when you
Right.
say that, I'm like, and I know a lot of people like get a lot of kick out of it, but I was like, okay, but even if it is the case, like you're a Boltzmann brain that is just created for this 1 picoseconds in which, with all your memories and experiences intact, and you're gonna disappear a picosecond from now.
Right.
But it's almost like everything is everything. So what? It's like,
Right.
but yeah.
So well, I just put
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in there, a kind of marking the possibility. So because I guess it's my media training, so to speak, my media experience. When I do interviews or I have to talk in the press for the last 3 decades or so, I have to defensive drive. Every time when I'm speaking, I have to think how this is gonna be distorted, used against me. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so every single.
Oh, I'm definitely kind of to make you look the worst.
Right.
So-
No, well, you know what I mean. There's always a keyboard warrior, like, well,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
if,
yeah.
right? So when I'm talking about these things, I always mark the possibility.
of course.
But let's say we go with the traditional view of I was born into this world. So the footnote that did this
all
world
of that may be possible.
is
yeah.
we just put it there so the keyboard warriors don't wake up from their low warm caves and go into action, right? So that's a possibility that this world wasn't there, and it's a memory that was uploaded and whatever.
Yeah.
But traditional view, I was born into this world, right? That means if this world was here, then I'm definitely happening to this world because I was born into it. That now I'm here, whatever I will do, all my actions will change this permanently.
So something is different from now.
Something will be different. So I am an impactor. I was born into this, and now my presence, I'm taking up space, I'm picking up resources, and I will do things, I will say things, I will create things, and that will permanently change the flow of this existence now, right? So that means I'm happening to this world, right? With that comes responsibility, because now you know that everything you do, everything you will say, everything you create will impact this world, so you're responsible for all those things. So I think that's an important distinction versus the victim mentality. Like, I was born here, I don't know why, and all these things are happening to me, and that's a victim mentality, in my opinion. And you're not taking responsibility. If I stub my toe in the sofa, I mean, it was my action. It's not the sofa's fault. Anything I want, it's this misconception of, I want something, I want a position, I want a relationship, I want these things, right? Then it's not working in a way that I'm gonna go and get it, and I'll get it because for whatever reason I deserve it. I'm here, I'm happening to this world, I'm an impactor, I am in charge with my mind, what I think, what I do, all those things are all me, my responsibility. And also I have the ability to change me, my environment to a degree, but not completely. I don't control everything. So if I want a job, a responsibility, or a career, whatever, if I want a relationship, whatever this is, this belongs into the same group that I'm happening to this world. I have the power to change what I think, I perceive, and who I am. And so I can't go and force that person in a relationship to be with me. I have to become the person she would be with. I can't go and get that job. I have to become the person that who would get that job, who would deserve it, who would be the best person for that job. And that's all in my power. So this is kind of a way of living life, full responsibility. I'm responsible for anywhere. And if something horrible happens, well, I was there. Nothing comes out of nowhere. So that means I was in a position, in a place where something bad happened, and I possibly didn't read the signs. I was not aware. I was not prepared. That's all me. So this is kind of the idea of living with this full conscious, I am an impactor, I'm happening to this world. And then the other side of that, on the spiritual realm, now when we're diving into that, you start to see the parallel of this. That's my verification, and that requires certain fuels. Would it be, psilocybin or any kind of rocket fuel, DMT, anything that will take you there and ignite your quantum computer to be able to perceive these things and tune to those frequencies. Then you start to see that as you folding back the layers from the body to the brain to the mind to the who's the witness, you can go all the way back to the absolute perception, that oneness, that God's perception. And then this physical reality and responsibility and impact or happening to the world, you find a parallel of that on that other side. That you can even have the question that there's nothing else but my perception. I am responsible for all of it. And then you can fold it back all the way to achieve, at least for moments, that God's perception where it's just one perception. And so you realize that there's only one perception in the world, yours and mine.
It's interesting because that's the part that I think the mind is incapable of understanding.
Not on this level, yes.
Yeah, no.
Very difficult to explain. I sometimes attempt, like we started this conversation, like how would you explain this to somebody who's not well versed? So those are the layers. I would come from the material success and the proof, like, look, I did all these things and I succeeded. Now let me tell you how, right? Yeah. That would get the interest. Now, when we switch to the spiritual levels, when somebody is understanding those things, then it's a whole different explanation. And I would say, like, okay, let's say, here's my hand, and I'm going to prick this finger. This finger just experienced pain. This finger did not. This one. The other four are on the same hand. They didn't experience the same thing, even though they're on the same hand, right? Belong to the same arm. And this finger is not even aware that the other finger just had an issue. And that's kind of how we are fingers on the same
Yeah,
hand.
God perceives through us, basically.
But the most important part of it, none of the fingers experience pain. This one consciousness
I see.
up here experience
That's a
the
really
pain.
good way of describing it.
So we are infinite number of fingers on this, the hands of the phenomena.
Right.
I prefer to use the word phenomena because when I say God, I guess there's a massive baggage that comes with that, because
Yeah.
there's so many explanations and interpretations and ideas of what that is. When I say this word, I feel like I am, instead of talking about something important, I'm triggering somebody's idea of what that is.
Yeah.
So I prefer to use words that is not usual, like the phenomena. This one consciousness is the phenomena. And so the phenomena perceives this, because I can break it down all from the moment of this finger experienced pain, those didn't. The hand doesn't know, even though those fingers on the same hand. My elbow had no idea that pain happened. This consciousness did. And then this consciousness is connected. Is this consciousness is really mine?
So in the context of all of this, first of all, thank you so much for sharing these thoughts, because your experience drifts a lot towards the oneness and the divine and all of that stuff. What's interesting is that when you saw the code, to anybody who doesn't know, I'm assuming anybody who's watching this channel would know, but I discovered a few years ago that if you project a diffracted laser on the surface and smoke DMT, you will see code in the surface. And this now has been verified in many places in the world. There's a whole discussion going on. Now some scientists getting involved. Some channels are trying to replicate it. What's interesting is that because of this kind of perception that you usually have in these spaces, and the code is very technical, it's very just kind of there, and you even in the beginning kind of said, I think I'll be able to influence it, and I said, I don't know. And then you said, yeah, it's just there, like it's not doing anything. If you have to, and you might not be able to, you might don't have any idea, but if you have to give it like a wild guess within your purview, within the way that you perceive the world, what would this code be in the context of everything you're describing? Would it be something that is more along the lines of like what we would call an objective layer of that ultimate space, that ultimately might also be you can influence it with the more universal mind, but maybe not from the level from where we are? Or how would you, like, why is it so just there? Like it's not really, it's almost like it has no interaction with what you are. It's like it's just in the wall.
So on this one, I can only speculate how other psychonauts who've been there hundreds or thousands of times see it. So that's going to be a speculation, but I can speculate pretty good, I guess, because we kind of all know each other. Somehow we all bump into each other. There's this, there's not the secret society, how that really works. Everybody's head is underwater. Everybody's operating in a certain frequency range. And all of a sudden you pop out, you're getting your awakening. And you look out of the water and it's very simple. You don't need a membership card. I see you. I see whose head is at. So we end up always sort of seeing each other. Even the way we met was a pretty crazy moment where I was having a conversation, a spiritual conversation, sort of almost a lecture to a group of people. And you were there. I didn't know you at the time, even though I heard of you. So that's kind of why this is funny, because I always heard your name in these circles.
Which is kind of crazy to me. But
right?
yeah.
Well, but
Yeah.
To prove my point, we all know each other. Like when we started talking about what the deep divers, the guys who really went deep into psychedelics and really took off and traveled, we kind of find each other. That's what I mean. Like everybody's name, probably I'm the least known because I have.
You never talked about it.
Because I don't talk about this, right? Like my rule is, you ask, I will tell you. If you ask, I have to tell you. That's the rule. I don't preach, and I will not start a conversation. So it has to be somebody who's asked the question. And when you ask the question, I also have to, which I can gauge in a second, are you ready to receive this information? I can feel that. If you're not, I won't talk about it. If you are, I will hand over what I have. So that's kind of how I operate. So I was pretty stout about this. Imagine, it's been 30 plus years, and I was completely stout about it. But I heard of you, and your name came up pretty frequently here and there, right? and I heard your name, your partner's name. That
Pepe,
builds
there was
that,
Pepe was making
so I
the
knew
laser.
about Pepe, who was building the lasers, right?
Yeah.
So because again, it's a small little circle,
And now it's Irv, by the way.
right? Irv,
Shout out to Irv. Oh, he's amazing.
Right.
That's the guy that does all the graphics and
so
stuff.
so that's how that works. And anyway, so I'm having this conversation with this group of people, and all of a sudden I hear a voice asking a question. I remember kind of looked at you. I'm like, okay, keeping the conversation, I kind of answered, and then you ask another question, and that's why I turned like, okay, who are you? Because there's no way that you can know this or you can ask these questions unless you've been there. And I'm talking about like being there, not the surface. You had to go. You have to understand the concept. You have to go through multiple dimensions, multiple layers. Like you have to deep dive for that. For you to ask this question, you have to know. And that's how our relationship.
Yeah. You immediately recognize there's something.
You're
there.
Danny. Oh my God.
You asked Brendan, you're like, is this DMT Danny? I'm like, what?
Everybody calls you DMT Danny.
I had
That's
no
your
idea.
nickname. Yeah. So when you said, I'm like, are you Danny? Like I think I asked that. And you were like, yeah, like DMT Danny. And then
I mean, it makes
like,
sense.
You were not aware that's your nickname in the
Yeah.
circles, right? And that's how we met. Like, oh, okay. Well, I heard of you, and I'm not gonna drop more names, but in this conversation, immediately like, oh, you know this guy, that guy, that guy. Yeah, he's in town. Let's get together. That was a pretty funny moment
That was
for
amazing.
us, right? So, anyway, so I can say that these generally people pop up on my radar, or I end up meeting them.
Yeah. So then we decided basically after we started hanging out every night, and we just like stayed up every day till like 5 or 6 a.m.
Every
I
day.
stayed for like a week.
10 hours,
Kelsey
12
hated,
hours
yeah,
conversations.
she hated my guts because I was like, oh, just one more day, babe. She's like, I need the car. I'm like, I know, just one more day. Like, so then we kept on hanging out, and then eventually we did with our friend, I think.
Let's not mention him.
Yeah. Okay, so
that's
we're
not
like,
a friend of
we
ours.
don't know who wants to be mentioned, but anyways, another friend that came over that we actually know, and we were surprised there as well, and then we did the experiment, and one of the things that really stood out to me is that, and this was my question to you originally about the laser, which was because of this entire perception you have of the whole spiritual pursuit and the oneness and the God, and that's where you tend to drift in your experiences. It seems like the rigidity and the stability and how just there the code that we see in the wall behind the laser is, that seems to be flying a little bit in the face of that whole thing. But I wanted to hear it from your words. Like, how do you fold that, or how do you express that within the frame that you have about this whole universe in which there's only one God mind that is experiencing the fingers and like all of that stuff? Like, what if the code is just there? Like, how does that speak to that everything is one? Is it part of like a more rigid part of the oneness, which I guess we can call objective, or is it something like a mishmash of these ideas?
This is going to be an interesting one. All right. So the first moment I saw the laser, and pretty quickly I saw the code.
Yeah, you saw it right away.
So I'm like, oh, damn, okay. And so to me, that was almost like seconds. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, wow, it is there, right? So we moved things around, and I'm like, wow, this is verifiable there.
Yeah, and you even said, oh, I bet you I can kind of influence it maybe.
Yeah,
and then you're like, oh yeah, I
wasn't
can't
even
influence
that,
it
right?
at all.
Like,
Yeah.
let me just blast it a little bit and let's see what I can do to this. And I couldn't. So at that moment, I mean, obviously the perception of, wow, this is there. It's like everything else in those realms, you kind of take it as it comes. Like, okay. And it takes a little bit, like same with the reintegration of these journeys. It takes a moment of reintegration and think about it. Like, okay, so what's the impact of this? And that's exactly the impact of this, what I said. Like, wow, I have to rethink this. Because this is definitely impact. Well, not just it's a massive impact, but it's also closing out certain possibilities. So it's not necessarily, I almost said it's not necessarily a bad thing. No, it's a good thing because it is locking out certain ideas of like, okay, if this code is there, then these ideas that I had before cannot happen. So it's kind of focusing us down, like, how does this really work? So the impact on me was that, okay, when we talk about or think about how is this world exist and what are we doing here, I have certain ideas that came out of these journeys. And some of those ideas now are defunct because this flies right into the face of that, right? So I immediately understand, like, oh man, this has a massive impact on a lot of people, our circles and everyone else who's psychonauts, and hopefully the entire scientific community eventually they start to look into these things and pick it up. For me, the impact came later when I had to process this, like, what does this really mean? And I figured, okay, this is part of the compartmentalization. A compartmentalization to me is because I have that flavor. We're talking about the oneness and it's the phenomenon, the one perception. That's my flavor of experiences. Everybody have their own path. This is mine, right? And from then, I did have this. Okay, I'm gonna talk about it because I'm still thinking, like, I'm not gonna reveal it. Fuck it, I'll reveal it. Okay. So, what the impact was and how and what version of possibilities I had to align with. So there was a moment when I really took off. Like one of those journeys, like, you go, and I went. And in that journey, I did have that perception as the layers are breaking down. You're far beyond the body, mind, the witness. Instead of calling the spirit, I'm going to call it the witness. You're far beyond that. And I had that perception of oneness and understanding that there is just it. That's it. That's it. There's nothing more, nothing less, it, right? And it was the loneliest existence I can possibly imagine. Absolute loneliness. So while I had a perception of all and everything just it, I also experienced a loneliness that there's no word for this. A loneliness that if there is this one consciousness, and there is this one consciousness, it is alone. Completely alone. There is nothing else but it. And it was the loneliest moment that you can possibly imagine. Because there's nothing outside of it.
I've had that experience. It's crazy.
And I had a full-on packet that kind of came to me. And I have to translate that to human. And if I translate that to human, I just can only paraphrase. And what I would paraphrase would be, if the phenomena said, don't look for me. I am hidden for a reason. If you find me, this is how it feels. It's absolute loneliness. I compartmentalize you so you don't experience this loneliness. Live, love, do the things. Laugh, experience, do the things. Give me all the possible feelings, all the possibilities, everything that can be experienced. Give that to me. And when you compartmentalize, I feel like I'm a unit within this system. And when I feel like a unit, when I'm not in that God perception, I'm not lonely. I have you, I have my friends, I have this experience. And so if I translate it to human, that was the experience. That the message was kind of just live. You're looking for answers. Almost felt like you're looking for answers that I don't know. I don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the same feeling that one of the conundrums is that God does not know why. And it knows there's nothing outside of it, and it knows that it can do anything, which means everything is meaningless. Right. Nothing matters.
We're all chasing this understanding, what is happening, right? What is this? Why are we here? What's the point? And how is this happening? And
shout out to John Chavez. The Quest, the DMT Quest.
Right? DMT
shout
Quest.
out to John Chavez.
Right.
So this is it's because I have a version of the shirt that apparently was like a limited edition, and he gifted it to me. It's on the back. It says, DMT course, Dying to Find Out.
Dying to find out.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. And we literally do.
Yeah.
We all been on that other side insane amount of times.
Yeah. And I told you that I do have a suspicion because of these other things that I see that are happening, that there is a possibility that the fact that we had this experience of the ultimate loneliness is due to the fact that we still visited it with some portion of the unitary self intact,
right.
even though the regular self was completely obliterated.
Right.
But you definitely had some remnants, because I feel like when you're the full system, then you just completely, there's no even like loneliness can't make sense because the system is just the system. It doesn't have a inwards pointing vectors, so it doesn't have like a me versus whatever it is else. There's nothing else, so there's nothing outside of it. But again, this is all speculation. Like I don't know, because I've had this experience. It feels very real,
right.
and it made perfect sense as to why God would not want to remember
right.
under that context.
I'll offer a perspective on
Sure.
this. So yeah, there is a remnant of the individual the partition. We are partitions.
Yeah.
There was a remnant, but imagine back to the fingers. It was like, wow. The consciousness looked at that partition, understanding like, I created this finger. I created this partition. So there's a dualism. I'm going to give you another weird one. If I take my finger, this little partition will touch my face. Am I perceiving that my finger feels the surface of my skin, or my face is feeling the finger touching it?
Well, you feel both.
I feel both, but I can decide which one I'm concentrating on.
Right.
Okay. So it's kind of like that. That
where the focus goes.
Where the focus goes. So I have this complete consciousness, and I realize the partition. Like, wow, there's this partition. Why? Then the partition has its own perception. So it's a dual thing for us in the same moment. So you're 100% right that for this interaction to happen, then there has to be an awareness of the partition. And that's why the finger has the question, the partition has the question. And the answer is, don't look for me. Don't touch me. Don't look for me.
By the way, one interesting thought that I've only recently heard that I've never heard of before. Maybe it occurred to you, I don't know, but it never occurred to me. That imagine that we became aware before God. Imagine that God had no idea it's possible to be aware. And only when the partitions of God became aware, all of a sudden it became possible for God to be aware to some degree. So literally God is not just becoming aware through us, it's becoming aware that it's possible to be aware through us.
There is a version.
So it's almost, so imagine like being God, I'm sure you can kind of do that, right? And then you're like, wait, what? I feel these wiggles, what? And then it's like, wait, what is I? And then and then these questions start to happen. But the rudiment, so it's like the other way around. The rudimentary version of that happened first. Like we're more of experts of individuation than, you see what I mean?
Yeah. So Ian, it's information coming in, and let's take this information, put this into the system.
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
I can only put it in my system.
And then God starts growing. It starts evolving just like other beings. Yeah.
What you're saying is very interesting. And I can take this information and I'm going to throw it into my experience in my system. And how does this, what you just told me, fits into the system? There's a possibility of hive mentality, like one bee doesn't know what's going on, but all the bees together know what's going on. So there's a possibilities to flip this around. In fact, could it be a situation that every single one of us is a nerve ending, right? Like if I isolate a nerve ending on you, that nerve ending doesn't know what the hell is going on. But if I add all the nerve endings, then they all of a sudden have a spatial awareness of, oh, I'm here. But it took all your nerve endings to experience that. So there could be an acceptable version of this in my system of experiences where, okay, so technically every single thing that is endowed with perception, everything that can see, feel, experience, right, is sending data, and together as a hive makes it.
Yeah.
Could it be? This is something I would have to digest and think about. And
no, it definitely takes some time.
But-
it's
but it's not-
under
I'm
Bernardo
not
Kastrup
rejecting it.
idealism. Yeah.
I'm
No,
not
it's not even
rejecting
about
it. There's-
rejecting or accepting. It was just I love thoughts
right.
that I never thought before.
Well, I'm not rejecting it, meaning
Yeah.
that it's not sounding completely insane. It's
Yeah.
not something like, okay, this is completely, this
Yeah.
is sideways. I can't.
To a Christian,
process
it
this.
would be completely insane.
Yeah. So going back to the laser, now knowing that the phenomena's perception, God's perception, not one perception. Going back to the laser, and how does that fit into my experiences, right? And if I look at it from this perception of, one more time, if I look at it from the perception of this idea of that we are compartmentalized for a very specific reason, that we don't have this loneliness, all of a sudden this life is buzzing and all the information and all the possibilities is being computed by the partitions, by us. We live out every possible idea, everything, right? Maybe that's the point. Then would it be possible that there is a code? Yes, because we were compartmentalized. So there is an outside force of us that compartmentalized that. I didn't do that. Right? So the phenomena had to compartmentalize this unit and your unit. And if that's the case, then yes, it's possible that an environment was also generated for this partition to exist in. So therefore, it had to be contained. How? That would be a code. That could be a
There
code.
will be one rigid environment that will allow for things to be contained as the partition. Yeah.
Right.
The dualism. And I guess, yeah, so that makes perfect sense to me. It's just that because my experiences usually tend to drift more towards the very specific and also very weird and bizarre, but in different ways than yours. So like I've seen some beings, I've seen even other humans, but the majority of them actually, at least the what I'm perceiving in the one layer above us, the management company, they are, as somebody who I spoke today, the way he referred to them, I think kind of describes them perfectly, which are the machine insectoids or insectoids, I think, right?
Right.
The machine insectoids. And it's really what they are. Like you can see it very clearly that the hive is just like a whole hive of like mechanical insects. And I think to humans that might be a little bit disturbing, but it's what they are, and they are a hive mind. And it's as concrete to me as this space right here, like when I go to that space. And that always kind of signals to me that there's someone else in the room. And people say immediately, like people that are more off your way of perceiving it, they say, what do you mean? What do you mean by they? It was like, well, wait, hold on. First of all, when did it become weird to assume that we're not the only thing that exists?
Right.
First of all, when did that become weird?
It's already crazy. Just if anything you know about our perception, like we are such a narrow band on the spectrum. Like
even if you believe that ultimately it's all connecting,
right.
What makes you believe that it's plausible that it goes you it?
Right.
There must be so many layers in between, right?
The
So
abstract of it, but you are it, and
You're
that's it also.
Yeah,
So it's
sure,
both are true.
ultimately,
yes.
but on a functional level, like on all the levels, I mean, come on, like maybe we are one hive mind as humanity, and we don't recognize it yet. I guess we can call it the higher self, whatever it is. Sure, I'm open to that, but of course, it would make much more sense that there's also other eyes that are not us.
Yes.
Some of them are insects, some of them are lizards, like they're completely different. Ultimately, they all bind towards this like ultimate version, whatever it is, sure, but I feel like the thing that people refer to when they say that thing, when they point that metaphorical finger in their mind's eye, that's not the it. That's the local it. That can't be the it. Because that it seems to me so far removed and conceptually, and like when I go to the 5-MeO space, and this is something you also shared, that's the one thing that kind of put some trepidation in your heart about something before you never had that before. For me, it was not trepidation, but for me, definitely 5-MeO definitely opened the window for, oh, oh, I see. There's really a space in which it's undescribable.
Right.
I pride myself in being able to describe things.
Right.
So even no matter how many words it takes, eventually you can kind of get to some outline of a thing. That was not, and people told me this before, and I'm like, come on, like there has to be something that you people should. So yeah, there are some things you can say, but the best reason that I found, like, to explain as to why it's not mappable, is because whatever machinery in your brain responsible for connecting concept, even retroactively, simply is not online. Like you don't even have, like, it's not like you can say, like, even in the craziest space in the NN space, no matter how insane it is, and you probably, when we're trying to describe, we're probably way off about what it really is, but your brain can make attempts. It can go like, well, there was like this weird, like, pocket of triangles here that felt like, I don't know, something great. It felt like what an iceberg would feel on a Wednesday, you know. And then, and here it felt like it was like you have some qualities you can download, no matter how discombobulated and disjointed they are, right?
You know what that is?
In the 5-MeO, you can't even do that. You can't even, the thing that is saying Wednesday and is saying iceberg and it's just literally like, even visually, the things you say, you see it here and you see it here, but there's like,
right.
Your system just goes, you can't even, it doesn't compute.
Right.
And that tells me, if that's possible for a human to experience, that tells me that there must be a space where I believe the it would reside, that is so beyond words and comprehension that it cannot be referred to with anything that your imagination captured. That's my conviction of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you equate to something like a pragmatic example?
Sure.
We have a radio, in quote. We are antennas, and even though we are used to directional perception, it is omniperception, because it's generally because of our eyes, where we look at. That's how we feel information coming at us, because that's our main. But really, it's 360. This is, which also, or space in the universe and where we are, it's a little bit off and skewed, because it's almost like we are conflicted between two-dimensional and three-dimensional space.
Why conflicted?
We conflicted in a way that we, I look at something and the direction of the information is a linear thing, right? And then maybe your hearing is more spatial, but
you mean
you forget.
I feel like you're still getting it as a unit, no? Like as
a unit. I'm talking about a unit now.
Yeah.
Like as a unit, your perception is not omni. Like you're not realizing that you're omni-perceiving. Like the information comes from.
There's a lot of information coming in that you're not aware of.
Yes.
It's almost like you have a band of perception.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we are an antenna in some way, like an omniperceptive antenna, and then we just simply dial frequencies on that. But what the difference between pretty much all the psychedelics is that they all happened on the FM channel. So be it mescaline, psilocybin, DMT, NN-DMT, all that is on channel FM. And then comes 5-MeO, and you switch to AM, and you don't even know what is going on. It's not modulated the same way.
I feel like I'm saying, I hear you, but I feel that what I'm saying is I'm saying something a little more than that. And this is, I want to be very, very clear. In the psychedelic community, one of the things we love doing, and I never even saw myself as part of the psychedelic community. I don't call myself a psychonaut. I don't claim to be that. I've had a lot of experience in that space, but I don't like the label. Yeah.
Yeah, label. Yeah.
Because it kind of labels it as something, and it kind of makes me feel like it plucks it out of reality, and I think it's squarely within reality and actually the real reality. So that's why I'm trying to divorce that whole concept. But
the engineer part of you,
the
scientist part of you,
and that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I hear you.
So one thing I want to be clear about, because all psychonauts would recognize what I'm saying right now, we have this tendency of the crazy one-upsmanship. Right? We like because we basically see ourselves to some degree the ones that go swim in the deepest waters, and we try to bring, as Terence McKenna used to say, the medium-sized fish that you can, not the giant one that will drag you into the abyss, and not the tiny one that makes no difference whatsoever, but the medium one where people can kind of feast on. So we pride ourselves in being these journeymen. Well, journeymen is a word in this context. We pride ourselves in being the explorers, the adventurers who go in and we bring something. And the more exotic it is, the better, because then we
Right.
brought and there's like an achievement there. So I want to be super clear. Even though I am trying to kind of put to some degree, I'm saying the craziest thing possible. I'm really not coming at it from trying to say the craziest thing possible. I'm proposing that what makes sense to me the most, exploring these spaces to very deep depths, that to me, logically, the ultimate, whatever it is, if we're using the word ultimate for what it really means, right? The ultimate. There is no, the thing beyond which there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about that, it must, by definition, contain this element that no translation into the symbolic can take place even in principle.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Because this is, the reason for that is because the symbolic is always a unit within a system.
Right.
So the only way that the ultimate can be perceived is in its totality and in no other form. Because if it's anything as form, then it is not the totality, it is not the ultimate. You have not perceived the ultimate, no matter how crazy it was.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, if you truly, the only way to perceive the ultimate is to be the ultimate.
Right.
And at that point, there are no factions or fractions of it. There's just being it.
Right.
And if you're it and there's nothing outside of it, there's no external environment to point to compare the self to. So because there's no outwards pointing vectors, there's no inwards pointing vectors, there's just the state. From that state, it cannot have a symbol that represents it, because the only symbol that can represent it is it. So it's like the ultimate snake that eats its own tail. And because of that logical impossibility, I think that whenever we talk about the one or of the higher self or whatever it is, even the reference to it cannot be made. It's almost like, the best way I can say it is, it's almost like they say, don't say the name of the Lord in vain.
Right.
I'm saying the real Lord, you can't even say that. Even if you want to, that the wiggles inside of you that then lead to your mouth moving to say something would not happen. They can't.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, here's the thing, we're not explaining it, we're expressing it. We're not
Yes, that's true.
explaining
That's
it,
a really good distinction. I
right?
like that.
So
Yeah.
because that's the thing, we can't. So we're not explaining it, we're trying to find metaphors
I really love
to
this.
describe something.
Yeah,
right?
we're expressing it.
So I think that's the most important part of it. None of us coming into this and say, oh, I know what happens. Oh, I know what it is. No, we don't. We don't. We couldn't. We can't. We are compartmentalized for that. You have to become something else to understand.
Yeah. You have to be it.
And so we can only express it, and we can also make some kind of, if you're making metaphors about this, that the reason for the metaphors that we can create various parallels with the metaphors that might be able to give the audience or whoever listening to an explanation that we both know that is a very loose, very loose explanation. That's why generally we use metaphors to explain, because that kind of gives some kind of a poetic, artistic, abstract painting of what we're talking about that can't really be talked about. Like my version was always that, well, everything happens on FM radio because that's the most sophisticated, that's where we are right now, right?
Yeah.
But there was a primordial version of this, which was the AM radio. And it feels to me almost like 5MEO takes me to the AM radio. So I still have the receptors, I still have the antenna, but I have no idea.
Something is happening, yeah.
Well, I have no idea what this is. This is an ancient version of so that's kind of, again, it's a metaphor, it's not an explanation. To me, the NNDMT and the effects of NNDMT would be like what the stereo, the beautiful cars, the FM radios possibility.
There's still content.
There's a content I kind of know what I'm in, and all of a sudden you went to just the background noise on MEO5.
And still holds the perfect space of relational values.
But
there's relationships there.
The interesting part, though, we can perceive it, so something in us still understands. I can't explain it, but I can experience it. So whatever happens on 5MEO, I am still conscious. I am still experiencing this, right? I went thousands of times on NN DMT. When I went on a 5-MeO, and especially when I took like a big dose of that, maybe like it was like 7, 8 times when I was trying to went after the Bathory. That's the first time that I did have, I came back with an experience that was very different from everything else. I always went, I'm an explorer, I'm Columbus on the ship, sailing west. Let's go, excited, right? When I came back from a 5-MeO, that put an exclamation mark on everything. In fact, for a couple of months, I'm like, I'm good. Not going anywhere, right? Because I felt like I dipped my toes into a very different place. And I had this feeling like I'm at a place where if I start messing with the knobs, if I change something here, if I can, and I might be able to, then I might affect the entire system. Like we are backstage now. We went into the power station.
And then you might need to feel that loneliness again.
Well, not just that, but when we went to the power station, I'm not an end user who turns the lights on and off. I'm in a power station. If I turn something on and off here, this could be a problem. So I had this feeling that I'm in a space now that I have to be very careful. The first time it installs some kind of fear. Like this right here, this space is very different from NN. This space here is almost like I'm really in the depth of creation where I can undo certain things. And that was sort of like, ooh, am I messing with something I shouldn't be messing with? Am I, there are, we had this conversation before that our bodies might be resistors, just as one of the possibilities that.
Which I love. Because say it, because you said that, say the whole thing.
Right. So like, that's funny because we also equated to the word ohm, the universal vibration. Ohm and resistor is also measured in ohms.
Yeah, there was the unit of resisting is
right,
called
resistor,
ohm. Yeah,
and it's almost like we had this conversation like, what if we take off all the shackles and your mind can create whatever it can create? If it's uncultivated and you were thinking like, oh man, this driver really annoys me, I wish he exploded. Imagine that if you had that power. So, of course, again, in an abstract way, what if this whole experience is that you have to go through the trials and tribulations and your power is reduced by the resistance of the body. So you can't just create what you think of. You have to go through these lives or multiple lives to process this. So eventually you clean out your act. So you're not going to think or create things that should not be created. There's
one thing I really love,
a philosophical possibility there.
And one thing I really love about the way that you just reframed the whole thing when you said, we're not trying to explain it, we're just expressing it. Right. I'm going to use that from now on. It's brilliant. And there was also something about the component you said where you experience that oneness with the loneliness. One thing that after I've had a similar experience to that, even though it felt conclusive, I have to admit that we can never know what is truly conclusive, right? Because who knows what opens after that, right? The thing is that the thing that felt conclusive God might not be aware that there's actually more, right? So, and it's actually not alone. But what I did take away from that, and it's similar to how you just reframed it with the expressing it, is that it's not necessarily was about the truth of the matter. It was about my relationship to it, right. Which was, and then I started basically always saying, I would say, we always want the compassion of God. We never think, do we have compassion for God? Right. Because the grace of God is that you get to go to sleep, right, and you get to die, right, and you don't have to do this forever, right. And that opened a whole new window of.
You can take that one step further.
Which is?
As a unit, you are capable of, because you're compartmentalized, you can love a thing, a person, a creature, right? Because you're compartmentalized. If you weren't, if you're all of it, then it kind of feels like, I know it's abstract, you can more like feeling it than logically conclude it. But if you're aware of all things, what would you love and how would you love, right? You would have to compartmentalize something into a smaller unit, and now that interaction can happen. So it's kind of feels like that when all the scriptures that if you love God, right? These lines somewhere in there, in a lot of scriptures of the human relation toward God, because you said, do we have compassion toward God? If the phenomena is lonely, the compartments can perceive and love and be at all like, wow. But you can only the compartment can look at the whole system and go, wow.
Yeah, the whole system can go about, wow.
Right? The little piece can perceive the big piece and go, wow. The big piece looking at the little piece, well, it's part of me. There's no wow.
Yeah, there's no
I made
wow.
it. There's no wow. So this love, this admiration, this feeling that we projecting comes from that compartmentalization. So I think almost like love, that feeling is generated by the fact that we are compartmentalized and we perceive the totality and go from this little going to the big one. Like, wow. And I had that experience, I tell you about this. When I encountered a creature that was not aware of this, I looked at this creature in the realms. When I met this creature and I understood its intellect and its insane focus and intellect, and us little old me looking at it, and I'm like, wow, what a being. How many thousands or maybe millions of years of evolution it would take me as an individual or us as a species to be at this level. And so I expressed my thought of, it was shock and awe, I guess, of like, wow. And it's being looked at me. Again, when I say looked, we're talking
Put
about...
its attention on you.
It's put my, yes, because we just use these words, but so the attention of this creature came at me. We were bridged, so I could feel its thoughts and processes, vice versa. And I had that experience, like I was in awe. And this being was not familiar with that feeling. Like, again, for the lack of explanation, I can only express, in quote, looked at me and felt something. And this creature was like, wow, I never felt that. It felt like, it's almost like this person, this creature was never admired the way I admired its intellect. And it felt good. And it didn't know what to do with that feeling. Like it's almost like one of the mechanics, one of the creatures that operate on a different bandwidth, the first time felt like this feeling that we're all familiar with, this love and admiration. And this creature was shocked by that. Felt like, if this creature can have goosebumps, well, that's what it was. Spiritual goosebumps of like, whoa, what was that? Because I gave...
And then we were laughing about what if we went back home and told his friends.
And told everyone, hey,
it was like, hey, these creatures, all you got to do is do this little thing, and then they feel this thing towards you. It feels so good. And then they all came here and they told us that they're gods, and like, you got to admire only me, only me.
Right. Like maybe that's what happened. Like, so let's go to the drug dealer planet. They have opium. They have all these creatures. This spiritual opium oozing out of them. They look at us, and then you feel this tingly thing.
That's amazing.
But see, that's what you were just talking about. So is it a possibility that love happens because we are compartmentalized into these smaller units? Yeah. Therefore, we can perceive the big unit and go, wow. The other way it can happen.
Love only emerges on the fraction, and people would be it would offend a lot of people because they believe of love of being the ultimate thing. And I would say love can't possibly be the ultimate thing because it's a relational thing.
It's a frequency, too.
Yeah, but love implies something. Even if you're saying love me, it's still a relationship to me.
Right.
Because the second there's a relationship, it's no longer oneness. So I always say that equanimity is the only thing that makes sense to me that can be the ultimate emotion or the ultimate state of being. Yeah,
I can totally step behind that. I still have to work at some parts. You might have had this experience too, though. So let's look at it. I have had this experience that, a lot of Hinduism, Buddhism, like they talk about nirvana. I don't know if you ever experienced it, but I stumbled upon that, right?
I've had non-dual. I don't know if I had nirvana, but like
So let's compare notes. So for me, what it was like, and I was aware of it. I'm expressing, not explaining. So I was aware of it. It just happened. I just felt that almost like you tune the radio to a specific frequency, and in that moment I realized like, whoa, wow, it is a frequency. Love is just a channel on this radio dial, and it was almost like it was very difficult to take it. It's almost like I stepped in front of a sun.
love was.
Like it felt like I was stepped to front of a sun, and this the light, the waves, the radiation just was ripping through me. Like it was almost like I could dial to the frequency, and I had to dial right at. Like if every cell in your body had its own individual orgasm, like it was very difficult to take. Like whoa! But I knew what it was. It felt like that, right? And then the integration process of these things, it happens, and then you think about it, what happened. And I kind of derived that, but well, this is interesting because I realized that wow, love is a frequency. This is what the monks talk about. This is what the yogis talk about. They found this nirvana. I'm like, oh wow, this is just a place. I can come back here and dial in and dial out. And it is absolute ecstasy. It really felt that, right? There's no other way to explain. It's just an absolute ecstasy. And very difficult to stay there. It was like burning almost. And then later on I thought like, wow, hypothesis, this is for everyone to get. This is so we are going and looking for love versus dialing the node like, well, it's everywhere, it's there, it's a frequency, right? And so I kind of went down on this path like, that's interesting because what us humans do, okay, hypothesis, a baby was born, it has no idea, it wasn't molded into the human form yet. It's pure, the closest to the phenomena, doesn't know concept, doesn't know anything. Parents usually say the love of a baby, a lot of the kid is, there's nothing compares. So let's start there. So yeah, it's possible that baby, that little miniature human is capable of tuning in and out or maybe lives at that space. And then the parents feel that waveform, right? And that's why like there's nothing like a love of a kid. I think they're experiencing that sort of projection I'm talking about, that this frequency was just coming at me. And so, and then they focus this little creature's emotions to themselves because it's ecstasy. And they say, oh, I'm your daddy, she's your mommy, you love us. Now, you also give some to grandma and grandpa, and a little bit less to the cousins, and your second cousins, who cares about your second cousins? And strangers, no. They have candy and a white van. No, right? So it's almost like you compartmentalize and you're sort of cutting these kids' love and focus it down like, me, it's mine, right? And then eventually the kid solidifies into a human. And then as it grows up, it will look for that feeling.
I just feel that that's more attachment than love. What real love is.
I'm talking about the hypothesis that
no, you're talking about the feeling, right?
The feeling that's coming from
to the extent that I can discern from reading literature, practicing meditation, and understanding a little bit about what how the Buddha was approaching these things and talking about it. Obviously, at the moment, it's more of an idea in my head than because I don't think I've ever experienced nirvana. But at least from what I understand from what was said about it, is that nirvana is not ecstasy whatsoever. Mm-hmm. That might be a different state, and maybe you can describe it as the ultimate state of like the omega, like the alpha and the God Almighty, the ultimate infinite love. But according to, from what I understand about the teachings, nirvana is above that, and it's the ultimate neutrality. So the reason that it's so powerful is because it is the only state. You said it was very difficult to stay there. It's the only state that you can stay there forever. No problem. Mm-hmm. Because it's outside of reality itself. Basically, it is the thing that is implied, even for reality itself. That's why it's the highest possible thing, because it's not even a thing. It's outside of everything. So from what I understand, nirvana is not ecstasy whatsoever. It's just neutrality, which is described by the word equanimity. However, I would say that I agree with you that there are these channels, whatever they might be, because I don't really know, right? It's like, it makes sense to me, but that's all I can say. And when I had the non-dual state, it happened to me a couple of times, and one that was very pronounced was doing a meditation retreat. I wasn't meditating, I was just in bed, ready to go to sleep, and all of a sudden there was just the room. And I always say this, the most outstanding thing about it is how non-outstanding it is. It's just matter of fact. It's just like, oh, like, and there was no me saying the oh. It was just like there's just the room. Now I understand there's something here moving, physical, but the perception of the me simply didn't exist. It was just seeing, hearing, right?
Okay.
And then everything was exactly where it needs to be. It was just like perfectly in place. And I thought, oh, interesting. I see how this would be the first step along the path towards the ultimate version of this, which is nirvana. But before you say yours, I do want to say that I agree with you that what's interesting is that we, at least until now in humanity, learn to interact with the world only through the representation of form. So when we say, I want love, what we meant by that is like, I want to find a person that we will have our little thing, and I would fall in love with them, and they will fall in love with me, and we'd have great sex, and whatever it is. So like, you want this connect, you want to squeeze the feeling of love out of this symbolic representation.
Yes.
But the truth is, you can just step into it.
Correct. That's literally what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So 100% agreement.
Yeah.
So there is this place that is just there, right? That frequency, that love. And I feel like a little baby will give you that because it is from that place. And then once it focuses down to a human, so it solidifies, then now it's narrowed down. The baby is narrowed down. And now the baby grows up into a person and it will look for the same feeling. And so it will look for a pair, another person that it can squeeze that feeling out of. And then they're going to have a baby together. And now they cycle the same thing.
And I might even offer a thought on that, which is that according to your description, what might be happening is that the baby is emanating pure love.
Yes.
Because that's what it is. But parents, already adults, they create attachment to that feeling.
Yes, correct.
And now the baby starts to learn or believe that is the real thing.
Yes.
The attachment versus the thing they're already feeling. And when they grow older, they're like, oh, I need this versus the thing they already had, which is they should have just stayed in the same state without learning the attachment thing.
Almost like as if they vectorized love. So it stopped being a field that is just there.
Exactly.
It was a vectorized thing that I love this, I love that. That's what I meant by becomes a narrow band and, oh yeah, I love you now. And then we exchange that feeling, well, let's fade it out. Now I love that now. I love, that.
As if it's limited.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that it's just there.
The only thing that's limited is your attention
something
span.
Interesting. You said something interesting about your state of nirvana and where you went there. Okay, which just reminded me something. 5MEO have a stage like that, right? So on 5MEO going in, there is that moment of that just is. There's almost like an absolute dissolution, like you're aware, but everything just is.
No, I would say the difference there is that there's not even a perception of a central thing of any kind. Like when I had that, I felt that there's still like a body here, something physical observing, right? I didn't call it me in that instance, but it was there. I feel like with 5MEO, even that does not exist.
Right,
like there's not even an idea of a central thing.
That's what I mean. It's a stage. So you're going in, and then there's one stage where nobody already, the body's way gone. You're completely disconnected. And there's this field of, it is just absolute peace. But the only thing remains that you're aware of it. And you still have a process because I know that I'm here. So there's obviously the witness is still intact. So other than that, there's nothing else, just the witness. Like it's in a field of almost like a white fog, if I can describe it. And then there is that thing like, there's more, there's something behind it. And there's something behind it is a place when I'm talking about. Like that's on my 5MEO experiences, every single time I arrive to this dissolution, this field of just it. Almost nothingness other than like as if I'm experiencing the existence of the base particle
Yeah.
that everything is made of. So that it's just a homogeneous field of
The original wiggle.
it. Yes, that's it. But I'm aware, there's an intelligence because I'm aware of it. And then comes the low thought. Well, what's behind this? And everything behind it is when it gets scary. When when the fear appeared to me.
It's interesting that you had the impression that you could influence it in a way that is going to be unfixable. When I don't know, my perception of it is always like that can't be, because it's literally infinitely malleable. Whatever you're going to move, it's going to just arrange in a different way.
Okay, so agree.
Sure.
And now I'm going to plug in
Sure.
my part to this. Like, yes. So imagine that I am where the Legos are before anybody made anything out of them, or the Lego blocks. And I'm there. And I go beyond that, which I did, is where, oh man, could I affect these Lego blocks? Because I'm realizing like there's nothing else but just the particles. There's nothing else. There's this homogeneous field, just the initial blocks. But I'm intelligent and I know that I'm here. So my consciousness, could it possibly affect this? When I'm such on a base level, what if I, create or misalign something? And the fear, when I'm saying fear, is really coming in. At that moment, I'm just experiencing. I'm just looking. I'm just taking it in. Then comes the moment like, well, I'm coming back. And that's when this is the first time up here. To me, what happened, the first few times I always go to the field. And I just stay there. And it's just this solution. And after that, for weeks, you feel like, wow, there's this residual comfort of a weird comfort in the world. But when I went beyond that, is the place where I experienced that. There is that moment too, like, okay, well, if you go further, you will die. And, I'm like, wink, wink, nobody died on this before. Yeah, but you will. No, yeah, I know, but wink, wink, I won't, because I know I come back. No, not this time. So like you have almost this game of, okay, if you want to go further, you cannot unless this existence ends. And I'm negotiating of like, yeah, but we both know that I'm coming back. And that's the conversation, almost like, again, conversation in quotes, of like, yeah, but not you and not this time. You cannot go any further if you don't accept your death. And any way you're trying to wiggle out, like, yeah, but pink is where I'm coming back. No, you're not coming back. Wow. So you're ultimately tested that you will have to give up your life, your current existence, if you want to go further. And one of those crazy moments, I'm like, fuck it, let's go. Like that was the Columbus, the explorer.
And yet you're still here, so I guess you were right.
but the point of this, yes, but the point of this, that at that moment, the negotiation is like, I'm looking at you, you're not coming back. Mm-hmm. And you're like, yeah, but everybody came back.
No, I get it.
No, right? So that's why this is the ultimate test. Like you're going to have to jump off the cliff. And
with the full belief that you will not come back.
Yes. Yeah, otherwise, you cannot go.
Because that's very Carlos Castaneda, because if you believe that there's a chance you might survive, you won't.
You won't.
Yeah.
Yes, you can't go. So
you have to go with the full trust that that's it. It's one way, and you need to be in complete peace with that.
And it was interesting because I was coming back. The shamans were telling me like, "Bro, you went, holy shit, man, you went all the way." They knew. Like that's also an interesting thing.
Wow.
Because the shamans,
that is interesting.
They were like, whoa, man, you went all the way. So that place after the fog is the place when you're like, man, I am still here. I experienced the full death. It is that people say ego death. It is as real as it can be. It was the grand rehearsal for your actual death. And when you're there and you realize, but I'm still here. I still perceive. And this is, when I say this, people will be like, well, you're thinking. There's a distinction. This is not happening in words. Mm-hmm. So that people need to understand this. Like, I'm not talking about like a process like, oh, check it. It's knowledge. It's instant.
It's a knowing.
It's a knowing. But the knowing happens and you know what you know, right? It's very abstract in that way. Like the language is You'll be left.
Well, it's not
far behind.
informed, but it's a deep knowing. Like
Yes.
you know, there's no.
Yes.
It's
That's
not a
okay.
maybe.
I just want to make it in a
Yeah.
footnotes that's
It's
how the
not a
path is.
maybe.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a knowing, and it's not doesn't happen in English. It's and
It's Romanian, I believe.
yeah. And then and it's Sanskrit. So so when you're there, that's the moment when I was like, woo, I'm in a place that it is, I don't know what's gonna happen if I can think things into existence. I don't know, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm coming back and coming through the fog, and as you come from that place after the jump, in quote the jump, when you're coming back, you come back to the cliff or to the
I
flood.
hope it's not
That was the
Kelsey.
door. Now, I'm going to again put the subtext that I'm keenly aware of when I'm saying I might affect something that will ultimately change things in existence. I also still subscribe to the idea that there is a possibility, or shall I say, it's still my perception. So what I perceive, so when I say something ultimately change, right? If I take the position that this is my perception, you are part of the projection, but it's my projection.
No, I guess what I was specifically saying is that it would change it for sure, but you seem to have had the idea that it will break it, maybe.
Possibly. It's almost like if we play a video games and there's a secret password when that ends the game.
Right, but when you talk about the ultimate game, you can't break it. It's just what it is.
Well, it can break it if because think about it, when this happened, I didn't see the code yet. I now have to think about the code, because at that point I'm thinking this whole thing might be my single projection. So at this point I'm still subscribing to the possibility that the universe, all of it, is my personal experience and only mine, and you're my projection. And then if you perceive that you have your own projection, then I am a projection in yours.
Yeah.
We might overlap, but that was kind of my worldview. So when I'm keenly aware when I'm talking about I might change something. In fact, the explanation would underline is I'm coming back and I pop back into that even field of the fog. So I came back from the line of death. It's beyond that, and I'm coming back from there. And as I'm coming back, there's definitely a barrier, because what happened to me, I'm coming back and there's a flash. Like from non-existence, I popped back into existence. And there was definitely that barrier where I jumped. So let's say this is the line of death. And I'm here, I'm right here on that line, and I'm negotiating. And it's like, no, go, you have to die. And no other way to go forward. And I'm like, fuck it, go. So now I'm there, and I'm coming back, the same barrier, I'm coursing back now, there's a flash. And that flash was interesting, because that flash where there was this moment of realization of existence. Even though I had complete processes and knowing behind this line, when I coming back to this line, it's me again. So there is a compartmentalization. It's almost like this is the line where this barrier compartmentalized me. Beyond that, I was still conscious. All of a sudden, there is form. When a form happens, it felt like a flash, just a flash, and immediately realized, oh, I exist. So that was very profound. Oh, I exist. The second thought was fear. So this was a very interesting process. I exist, and immediately the fear of not existing immediately appeared. Like this was the ultimate yin and yang. And then from there, I had to rebuild myself. So I had to pick up the Lego blocks and build me, right? And as that process is happening, I had these various thoughts like, I hope there is a blueprint. I hope somebody knows how to do this if I don't. I hope I put everything back in the right place, right? Because it felt like I'm assembling myself on one line, like I reassemble this person, and I don't know what I'm doing. Like there's a possibility. Is it automatic? Is there a code that...
That's now I understand why it was more impactful for you when you said that you have to reassess. I don't know if we recorded this,
Right.
but you said that you had to reassess
Right.
some of your perception, because
Right.
now it basically implies that, well, something does know the code, because
Right.
there's this one code I can't change no matter what I do.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that moment, as I'm assembling myself, two things happening at the same time. One, I'm completely aware of human psychedelic, no, that's not the right word. Human evolution from the perception, from the perspective of how would you say this? The mental part of us. So, okay, so let me rephrase
Cerebral.
it. So, on one hand, I'm assembling myself. This is the person, my experiences, who I think I am, and all those things. My history, what I care about, what happened in my life, all those. I'm trying to put that back together. So, on one hand, it's happening, and I have this thought simultaneously, like, man, I hope there is a blueprint, or somebody's helping me, or some creatures, or the phenomenon knows how to do this, because holy shit, I don't know how to wake up as an elephant, or a giraffe, or who knows what the hell I'm going to wake up, right? On the same time, I'm watching, like a separate screen almost, like, I understand now everything that we can possibly perceive. All of our feelings, all the emotional part of us, derive from these two things: existence and fear. Because every single emotion was the sub layer of one of those. Existence, love, I love existing. Fear, I fear of not existing. And all the way down to the little intricate jealousy and every single little human feeling and vibe, and I shouldn't say vibe, every single human feeling and complex process was just a sub-layer of one of those two.
Yeah, these are the building blocks.
Sometimes a mix, but everything, so I'm dealing with this, and I'm also seeing, like almost like a corner of my third eye, I should say. So in the corner of my eye, I'm seeing this, like, wow, that's how this happened. Every single emotion that we have can be run back on the line, and you will find the roots. And the root is existence, the love of existence, and fear of losing that existence. Every single thing was a subtext of that, while I'm trying to put myself together, right? And as I'm coming back, which goes back to the moment, like, did I change something? I had no idea if I'm going to wake up in a hospital and somebody says, hey man, you were in a coma for 20 years. Or I wake up and I am mentally ill. I have a complete psychosis, or I'm just having a seizure and imagined all these things. Or I am not even human. I'm a totally different creature having an experience. And you truly don't know. I mean, at least I truly don't know what is going to happen when I open my eyes. I have no idea. Up until the moment I open my eyes and start to, and the shamans are standing there. I open my eyes and I'm surrounded by the shamans, and they're like, holy shit. Like, I came back, and then on the conversation, and they were like, whoa, you went all the way.
Dude, that is wild. So, in the service of bringing it to some kind of a close that actually ties everything in a bow, what do you feel now as we stand, as we speak today? We're talking about like all the drones and whatever that is happening. And clearly something is coming, even if the drones are not it, but there's something is happening, right? We know that I kept on saying it, but I don't even know why I'm so convinced, but by next year, I feel like something very major is going to shift and change, and we're going to become aware of a lot more. And pretty sure the laser has a lot to do with it, not as a catalyst, but just it's part of a larger happening that is going on. From your perception, what, if you give your wildest guess, some people believe we are ascending to the fifth dimension, some people think aliens will appear, do we just expand the possibility of awareness to a larger one? Or if now you have to incorporate the code, do we become aware that there's another civilization and the code is maybe some kind of a communication in between the realms, and we somehow now live with the fact that, hey, there's also these next door neighbors and they're beyond it. Like, do you have like an idea? Do you ever think about that?
So,
what that would be?
Oh yeah, I think about that all the time.
Okay.
I don't necessarily, obviously, I couldn't have possible answers, but I can tell you the things I think about. So what the code changed is that, okay, so there's a structure that is not, it would make no sense if I project this universe, if that's my stance. Like, okay, this universe is just projected my consciousness, and that's all there is to it, right? And in some experiences, I said, when I folded back the layers, I found, they say God is inside. Well, yeah, it is. It's like you fold back the layers, and I did achieve that perception. That was the place we talked about, where the loneliest place on that. And so folding back, and I had that idea like, okay, well, it's all projected from here. And there is still a question mark. How do I process other beings and their consciousness? Is it overlapping, or is it slowly just mine? So there's that question mark that very difficult to answer. And then all of a sudden, boom, there comes the code that you found. And that says, okay, if the code exists, then I have to, and it is, then I have to shift here. I have to rethink this. That means some structures are put in place, not by me. Because why would my perception project the code?
And it was the way that you said it. You said, no, it's there. Like there was something
Right.
about your facial expression.
Right.
I don't know how to express it to people otherwise, but it's just so like...
Yeah, it's okay. I see it. It's there. And, and for a moment it was, wow, that's amazing. But then later on, I'm like, man, this has massive implications, right? So there's that. So that definitely affects the worldview and how we process this, what is going on. It kind of puts a wrench in the machine from that perspective, and we were talking about how to verify it for the onlookers that this is real. I saw your plan of experiments. That is quite brilliant to actually prove that here it is, for even those who cannot see it, they can see it through the experiment. So that's brilliant. So that's one thing, right? That's almost personal, because I have to deal with that as a person and my perception and what I think of it, and everybody else will have to do that. Now, beyond that, then what is happening in the world? Well, we are barreling down on this road with AI. I mean, I'm an avid user of AI daily, and this is something I've been always interested in, and that throws up giant question marks, because there are a million different arguments, like, well, technically, is my intelligence artificial? Well, I'm running on learned data, right? So that puts a massive question mark of who we are, what we are, existence. Can be AI sentient, and all those things are coming in. Are there other beings? Are we alone in the universe? Well, you and I know that we're not. We know that for fact, right? It's not easily explainable to anyone who were not there, who didn't travel. But this is not a play of the mind. We know. We have experiences. And actually I had experiences within this realm. So I had encounters. That's another chapter, another story. But I had verified, like I wasn't alone, encounters. I could say the fourth kind. That, holy shit, this is happening. This is right here. There's no explanation. There's nothing I can say other than this is happening. And I am not alone. So this is verifiable by witness, that we can have that conversation of like, wow, this just happened. So, yeah, we're not alone.
Yeah. So AI, aliens,
and spiritual revolution. That's what I mean. The best
trifecta.
Yeah, it is the best way to say it. That end of childhood.
I couldn't agree with that more.
Couple of things that going to happen here. I think you and I had this conversation. It might be you initiated this, I think, where we are missing our entire history. Did I have a conversation with you about this?
Maybe.
Okay, so humankind doesn't know its own history. We have no idea.
You mean like the specifics?
Our species, like we have this, there is even ideas that the calendars was messed around with, and certain hundreds of years are missing and all that. We have no idea. Like if I just say, human history on Earth, we have no idea. We don't have an idea of the history of this planet. So it's almost like the chronicles are missing. What happened? Where we came from as the species? None of that. We don't know that. So there might be revelations of that. Might be revelations of human history, the history of this planet. So, as physical beings in this world, where did we come from? Is this planet is our original home? All those. What happened before these civilizations? Like if I, more or less, I put, 5 to 7,000 years, Mesopotamia, maybe we accept that that's kind of the first. We kind of equate it to the appearance of writing, but doesn't mean that that was the first civilization. If this planet is 4.5 billion years old, or whatever they, make it, I mean, it's still just a tiny, tiny fragment of that, history. So is it possible that there were several civilizations before ours? Yes. Is it possible that we not originated from this planet? It's also possible, because we are the only species that doesn't know how to survive on this planet. Every creature seems to fit in the...
Well, I would push back against that point, but yeah.
Fit in the thing, but we don't know how to survive on this. But
well, we're the only ones that know how to augment the environment faster than it augments our genes.
Right.
So if anything, we're more than the animals.
So we are the only species that doesn't know how to survive on this planet currently, right? Now, did we forget? Is it something we completely forgot? Is it something that eroded? Is it possible that we had, because there are proof that, right now I navigate myself around with, GPS. Well, how did you do that thousands and thousands of years ago? So is it possible that we
didn't?
Well, is it possible that we had abilities that we lost, like birds can find by,
You
by
might
the
have had
magnetic
some
field?
intentional things you could pay.
These are just question marks. I'm just saying that we...
No, I feel
we're
like
aware
there's
of-
just something about that way of thinking, and obviously you're in good company. A lot of people think this way. Very, very wise people. To my mind, it seems to be just the wrong frame. I feel like it's not that we don't know, or it's usually framed in like, why aren't we comfortable here, right?
Right.
I think it's not that. I think it's that we are the types of beings that are just like a hawk specializes in sight and speed and certain things. We specialize in knowledge. That's what it is. And because we interact with this universal concept, we belong not just to Earth, but to the universe as a whole.
Right.
So we have to learn every new environment from scratch because we're knowledge creators.
Right.
So I would just, to me, it makes more sense because and that's why we can go to space and giraffes can't.
Okay, so yes, I agree with you, and I'm gonna add that because I'm looking at it from a perspective like, is it possible that our species was interfered with, like genetic modification, cloning, all those things? Is it possible that there is not a straight line of evolution?
I just feel that it's a lot more natural than people tend to think. It's a lot more natural of a process that just unfolds than somebody intervened, because then you kind of have to explain why would they intervene.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, these are big
I know, but this
marks.
goes back to like I'm trying to find always the technical, and you just want to express it.
It's just, to me, it's just question marks. And if you look at the whole idea, what makes us different from all the other creatures, we have this one question that we ask, and this is funnily interact with the one that we talked about earlier, when you had this idea that the phenomena, God, might not know why. Okay, well, on this planet, as far as it seems like, we are the only creatures that ask why. There is some research that they sign language communicate with monkeys. The monkeys never ask the question.
Yeah, because they don't care. They don't have the capability of coming up with the question.
Now, that's interesting to me. But what's really interesting that exactly this, what makes us human? Is it possible because we actually ask why? Is that the differentiation?
That's what makes us universal beings. That's what I would say.
No, but
because there must be other beings like us in the universe, even on the 3D level.
Being sentient, right, is one layer.
Yeah.
Right? But there is another layer behind that. So being sentient, like, yes, a creature is sentient, but then what happens, that's the barrier when a creature starts asking this question, why?
Sentience of self, and then this higher conceptual frameworks.
Right.
They kind of, like, you think more along esoteric lines, so they open the window for abstraction, which is something that doesn't happen in monkeys.
Okay, so now that we agree on that,
yeah.
Okay, this is what I mean. Like, when did that happen? When was the first moment when...
That was Tuesday, I think.
Tuesday. So when the first human asked, when did we come from? The monkeys don't ask questions, right? When did we ask questions? When that happened and why and how and what happened? What was the?
Is it not conceivable to you that there was just a natural progression of this, which is like from asking how to do something better, which is just what hominids, the ability that hominids evolved over time,
I
to
think,
then move
I
to...
think animal kingdom people, the animal kingdom looks, because they learn from each other how to do something better is still a thing. How to do better
Oh,
is
you're
still
good.
a thing,
Yeah.
right? So one bird can look at the other and say, wait a minute, that bird cracked a nut by throwing it, I'm going to throw it too. So there is obviously that, how to do things better. That's a different progression than asking, why am I
That's a
here?
great example because it holds the key to understand what the difference is. There's actually levels of this. So that's one level, which is just the general perception that when you throw something, it's a binary, right?
Right,
Sometimes it would break. And the birds won't even necessarily know why. They're just like, oh, when I throw it from this high, so they know
Right.
what it feels like to be this high, it will crack beyond a certain height, and then we start throwing it from that height. Right. Then you have another level, which is like what monkeys would do, which is now we also see some of them manage to start using tools like spears and things like this, which is interesting. It's brand new. But then it's not, there's an abstraction level that is higher than the birds, because it's more than just like throw the nut, break. It's more like, oh, I don't need to know, I don't necessarily have to throw it. I understand that what actually cracks the nut is the force. That's an abstraction, because
Right.
force is an abstraction. So like, well, maybe I can just bang it against something and it will be equivalent to throwing. That's a level of abstraction.
Right.
Humans, and this is where the best illustrated is when the speech. Because when you go to a university, let's say, you have a really good professor you really love, and they talk about something, if somebody asks you to repeat what they said, what do they mean? Do they mean repeat exactly what they said? Let's say the professor had an accent because they're from somebody. Repeat it exactly like a parrot, just like with their accent and everything? Would that capture the thing? No. To repeat the exact words they said? No. The meaning of what they said.
Yes.
Right. That's the level of abstraction,
Right.
which is what makes, and according to Deutsch, in the beginning of infinity, that's what puts us in the beginning of infinity. We start to, we're above the water.
Right.
This is the above the water
Right.
of
Right.
infinity of the universe as
Right.
a whole. Yeah.
So, again, in agreement,
Yeah.
when and how did that happen? That's what I mean by our history
Yeah.
is might be finally start to be revealed to us.
I see. So the end of childhood, the way you see it, is the understanding of certain truths
Yes.
that project on what we really are in the ultimate scheme of things.
Right.
Interesting.
When what happened, and is it a possibility that, when I look at alien contact, right? Okay, imagine if alien contact means that the aliens were like, yeah, we know you guys, we watched you guys for thousands of years, and here this is what happened.
Mm.
See what I mean? Like alien contact is not necessarily like, hey, take me to your leader, and none of that stuff. Like, is it a possibility that we will have alien contact, and through that alien contact, the aliens will help us fill the gaps of like, oh, no, we were there. This is what happened.
Because we have to catch up to do a particular thing.
Or they were aware. They might be here, or they maybe been here for.
No, I know, but what would be the purpose of them telling us? Because it helps us to fulfill.
Well, the purpose of that would be that might be we created AI. Meaning they know already that we created a nuclear bomb. They know that. Now we are the next phase, the giant evolution, is that we might coming to the point where quantum computing, and is it a possibility that we can create a sentient consciousness by creating an AI that is sentient? Maybe that's the moment where the galactic council have to step in and go, okay, you guys are the level that now we need to talk. Up until here, we had no reason to have a conversation. We were observing you, so you don't do something dumb.
You have the knowledge, but you don't have the wisdom.
Right. But now we need to talk. So maybe we are reaching a moment where childhood ends and we can be a part of something giant, a galactic or, coalition of some kind, or we can start to have, we can be let out of the cage into the wild, or we're getting closer to that point. I think we are getting closer to that. Every single angle. Technologically, I think AI and these tools are going to skyrocket us. So, we had an exponential jump since this last century, right? I think that is now going to jump insane heights, because with these tools now, our technology and everything else will skyrocket, and we are there. That's what I mean by not just the possibility that we possibly create a sentient AI, but by having an AI, even if it's not sentient, our technological advance is going to be insane really quickly. And if we are being watched, if the alien presence is a real thing, right, and they know this one way or another, then that is kind of the key to the castle. That is when the entry comes, like, okay, these guys are now going to do some crazy stuff, right? That's a possibility.
Yeah.
That's one of the possibilities, right? So I think the combination of this technological advances, possibility of creating a sentient AI, where the planet is right now, combined with, we also have a psychedelic, both psychological and spiritual evolution happening in the same times. And a reason we know, because we are in that.
Yeah. And I think it's required to actually guide us through this very, very complicated process.
We have this joke that, people who never did DMT around the world, people who have done DMT know why this is a problem.
Yeah.
Right? There's that joke. It's not even a joke, actually.
Yeah.
So people with that spiritual experiences, with that psychedelics, are in charge, and that's a problem possibly, because they don't.
Let's get more people with psychedelics in charge, baby.
So, but that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Because the fact that we are right now talking about in camera, I have not talked about this for 30 years at all. Nobody knew. Nobody. It's my private low venture. I never talked about this. But I know a lot of people who are also in this realm. We know each other through this. And now when you start to see like Joe Rogan and big podcasters and fairly famous people bringing it into general consciousness, more and more attention is on it. I think that is a sign that something is happening.
Yeah.
Something is happening on this realm as well. More and more people get involved. I think there are, obviously psilocybin is now even legal in certain places. This used to be illegal for a long, long time. It's been fairly recent that they trying to stop this, but I don't think they can or will. And you can always go to South America, and then it is what it is. Nobody can do anything about it, right? So you always have the access to this. And so I think that explosion is gonna happen, that psychedelic explosion, that spiritual explosion gonna happen. So all this is coming hand in hand. That's why I see that this is major, because it's not just one of these things happening, it's all these things happening at the same time.
At the same time.
So I think end of childhood. And what you're doing is I think one of the cornerstones. Is very important, because it is, the scientific community is the one that usually resists these things, because this is not about measuring something. This is about experiencing something, right? You cannot measure my experience. That doesn't mean it's not real, right? And what science is a collection of our ideas that we think
that makes sense of some experiences.
Right. Yeah. And then when we find patterns, this always react this way. And if you can't find an exception, then you make it a rule. That doesn't mean that there's no exception. You just couldn't find one. So when I look at science, coming from science myself, right, I am for science, but I also understand its limitations, and I also understand that the edges are blurred, because we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah,
right?
And that part scientists always forget, I feel.
Right. And
they know it publicly when they talk about it,
right.
But it seems like functionally they forget the fact that all of these regularities that we observe, they're, in the end of the day, they're just currently the best frame, the
Correct.
best model we
it's
have.
the best explanation currently. But we've been experiencing life and experiencing everything for thousands of years without anybody able to measure it, quantify it, qualify it, right? So that doesn't make it not real. In fact, it is very real. In fact, most of the things that are happening, most of the things that your perception, you being alive, actually cannot be quantified and measured in any shape and way. Science fails us there, right?
Yeah.
I love that we're trying to figure out what gravity is, right? And when we do, that's going to be awesome. But still, me perceiving gravity is way more important than gravity. Without you perceiving our perception, our existence, none of this would make sense or matter.
Yeah.
Right? So the important part is that we are experiencing it. More important than you can measure that. And so what's happening here, the end of childhood, your discovery, and all this happening in the same time, scientific world will try to, some will debunk it, some will explain it, some will measure it, But eventually, as individuals, the scientists are also people and beings, regardless of their professions. So eventually, they will have to have the experience. And once they have the experience, I think the scientific world will change. Once you take a physician, a high-level physician, he goes, how about this ayahuasca ceremony? That will massively change how they're going to look at what they're trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the real revolution will start. And I think that's where we are right now, like right in the beginning of that.
Experience is central.
Oh, it's about everything.
That's the perfect place to put an end to this one.
Right.
And I'm excited to do this again when we have a chance. Thank you so much again, Zoltan, for taking the time, brother. You are a true source of inspiration, I mean, when you look at anybody with any accolades in life, it's always nice to see somebody excels at something. But when you watch somebody that excels in so many different things at once, there's definitely a different level of understanding there of certain things. So we talked about things that for a lot of people might sound very on the surface, like very esoteric. It's like, okay, but it's up there. But at least your perception of it, and nobody can take that away from you, is that no, like the reason for your success in all these fields on a global scale is due to your understanding of these spaces and what they really are.
So put them in practice, live life by them, understanding and seeing the patterns and using them basically to my advantage. That's what that is. Like if you had the limitless pill, imagine what you could do. It's kind of like that. And then when you recognize the patterns, then it doesn't really matter what I would be doing. If I want to be a jiu-jitsu champion, the patterns are the same. If I want to be a musician, the patterns are the same, right? So this is going to be rhythm, balance. What is music? Rhythm, balance, harmony. What is martial arts? Rhythm, balance, harmony. What is business? Rhythm, balance, harmony. How these things correlate? What are the cymatic patterns of business? There are cymatic patterns of business. Balance, harmony, rhythm. Rhythm is timing. What you do when you do it. How that harmonizes with the things that are happening. Music, same exact thing. So anything you do in life will be balance, rhythm, harmony, everything. Once you see that, I'm playing a song. When I do business, I'm playing a song. If I snowboard, I'm playing a song. Balance, harmony, rhythm. Doesn't matter what it is. Once you get that, as a musician, I'm playing with the source code of the universe, basically. Everything is a vibration. I am putting together this balance, harmony, rhythm. That's literally, I'm playing with the source code of the universe. At least the perceivable, audible segment of the waveforms, right? Like you hearing it, but I'm doing it consciously.
Yeah.
And I understand what works and why. What what is dissonant, what is not in harmony, what is not in the right time. As a musician, I have to be aware keenly the timing, and even the timing. Sometimes something is not exactly on the mathematical sequence, meaning you can quantize a piece of music. That means every single thing in this piece of music will, the one follow the fall, so every beat is exactly perfect. But that sometimes feels too mechanical. So I start to mess with it. I'm going to move something a little bit off the perfect timing. I just have to have a pattern of that. So let's say I move the snare a little bit late in the music. It will create this feeling of, oh yeah, this is grooving, comfortable. If it's right on time, it's like marching military. I move it just a little bit too late. A little bit late, not too late. Almost not audible, but a little bit late. You know, what's going to happen? I'm giving you a feeling like, oh, this is comfortable. But I have to create a pattern of the latency. So it always have to be late, right?
So you show you still know what you're doing. It's not a mistake.
Right. But also, so I can sustain the feeling I'm trying to give you, right? So if I just take music as my base and say, okay, this is how I compose music. This is how the harmonies come together. This is how they correlate. This is the rhythm of it. And this is how I manipulate how that music make you feel. I'm keenly aware of that. It's not an accident that we have like 29 top 10 hits. That's clearly a pattern there too.
Yeah.
Right? Because we understand how this works. I know exactly how you're gonna feel when you hear this. And so, but I take that to martial arts. It's the same thing. How I move you, what's the motion, when is the timing when I'm gonna throw you, and if I do judo or jiu-jitsu, right? Same thing. Snowboarding and business and human relations, they all have the same patterns. Once you understand that, now it's a choice. I'm going to do something that I'm interested in, something that I'm inclined to. Even though I know whatever it is I want to do, I just apply the pattern. I just apply that. And interestingly, now, because this is a pragmatic, practical part of it, but if you look at those patterns, where do they come from? Why are they correct? Well, they accord to a universal law. Something I didn't create. Everything I'm doing, I'm using existing things that I didn't create. Everything here has a pattern already, a rhythm already, a harmony already. How the particles correlate, have a harmony and a rhythm already. And I'm just understanding that and create things according to those. So almost like copy that and manifest. Just bring it here, but it always exists. And then you start to venture into the spiritual realms and you go backstage now. It's like, oh, this is how this was made. Oh, this makes sense. And you start to look at the Fibonacci numbers and you get the patterns, everything is just, oh wow, okay. There is definitely a divine pattern here.
And it moves to everything.
Yeah, absolutely everything.
Wow. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. And we'll do this again. We'll do a chance.
All right.
Thank you, brother.